Hi, my name is Keshav, and I'm a production engineer with the platform team at Instagram. For the past 5 years, I've been supporting efforts to help Instagram scale and tackling various reliability challenges along the way. Together with my colleague Kostya, we're going to tell you about how Instagram uses data annotations to scale the cumbersome task of reliability analysis, and how we use this process to help move from a reactive to a more proactive approach to reliability within other teams at Meta. At Instagram, we aim to give people the power to build community and bring the world closer together. To do this, we empower creators to express themselves in new ways, like Reels, Stories, or with friends in Instagram Messenger. To handle the millions of uploads, direct messages, and live streams that are created every day, behind the scenes, there's an incredible amount of infrastructure that makes all of this possible. While we do our best to keep them out, sometimes the chaos monkeys find their ways into our infra and wreak a little bit of havoc. On occasion, you've probably experienced this yourself, when you've tried to refresh your feed or send a message, and instead see an unhelpful error message pop up. To help our teams detect these events and track the reliability of Instagram services, we rely on SLIs and SLOs to monitor the health of our platform and react accordingly. Before continuing, let's do a quick recap. What are SLIs and SLOs? SLIs, or service level indicators, and SLOs, or service level objectives, are concepts that can help measure the long-term reliability of your service. SLIs are the specific metrics that you use to quantify the reliability of your service. These are usually a few high-level metrics that represent what the user expects and have high enough signal that they can capture different aspects of your service's reliability. Good examples of an SLI are availability or latency. Implementation-specific metrics like CPU usage or memory footprint generally don't make good SLIs because they aren't meaningful to a user of your platform. Service level objectives are the long-term goals we set for an SLI, and they usually have two components, the goal itself and a time period. For example, successfully serving 99.9% of requests over a month, or serving 99% of requests within 100 milliseconds for a given week. At Instagram, we have service level indicators that represent metrics from different product surfaces, like the volume of error response codes on certain messaging endpoints, or the number of successful media uploads. Based upon these indicators, teams establish SLOs, like achieving a certain percentage of successful media uploads over a 7-day period. From early on, Instagram has been tracking our SLIs and SLOs, as they're critical for us to understand our overall reliability trends. Over time, the custom tools that we built to do this started to show their age, as the number of Instagram surfaces and associated SLOs exploded, especially over these past few years. We found ourselves spending a considerable amount of effort trying to maintain this tooling. A couple of years ago, a centralized effort emerged at Meta to help unify this SLO tracking experience into a common tool called Slick. And here's Kostya to tell you a little bit more about it.
Thanks, Keshav. Hi, my name is Kostya, and I'm a software engineer in the Detection Experiences team. For the past 8 months, I have been working together with Slick team on improving the user experience of SLI and SLO tracking in the company. In the next couple of minutes, I'm going to talk a bit more about the Slick tool, how it allowed to standardize the process of SLI and SLO tracking in the company, as well as we'll talk about new analytical feature we have been working in the past half. But first, let's talk a bit about more historical way of how people were doing SLI and SLO tracking in the company. Some people were using custom dashboards, others were using spreadsheets, docs, wikis. Others were using our internal monitoring system, which allowed them to do a short-term tracking, like say hours or days. Obviously, a lot of different tools, and that was very different depending on the team. Of course, this was not great in terms of centralizing the effort, and well, people didn't really have a knowledge of how SLI and SLO tracking should be done or how others are doing that. Now, even if some teams were doing SLI and SLO tracking, they didn't actually know like how others are doing that. Or, for example, if they were talking to some service, what are that service SLO? The only way for them was to go and find the owners and ask them. There was no system where they can look up this information. The systems that people used before also didn't allow them to do the long-term tracking. They were focusing on very short periods of time, and there was no way to look at the data from half or even half a year or even a year. And of course, no integration with existing on-call tooling existed before, which was a lot of hassle for the teams that were doing on-call and they were tracking their SLI and SLOs. In 2019, in move towards a more stable infrastructure, a group of enthusiastic software and production engineers have started to work on a tool called Sleek, which is a SLO management platform for the whole company. It was a centralized effort, and currently more than 1,000 of services are already onboarded there, and most of the critical on-calls already use it. In one of the previous at-scale conference talks, my colleagues David and Philip have covered the history of Sleek, the way how it works, what were the challenges while building it. So you're very welcome to watch it. As I said, the introduction of Sleek was a huge success. However, it quickly became evident that just tracking SLOs is not really enough. From user research, Sleek team learned that service owners face difficulties in identifying the failure patterns that they need to address. And of course, Sleek as a tool would like to help people to cope with that and to deal with that. That's why Sleek should have a way to give some actual guidance on how to improve the reliability of the services. And in order to be able to do that, we need to be able to draw the conclusions from some of the past SLO violations or from the events that led to SLO violations. Well, obviously, to do that, we need to have the data in a very structured format. Otherwise, it will be not clear what was important, what was not, what was most common issue, and what was not. And without reliable source of information, teams might prioritize just fixing the wrong problems. Here at Meta, the data tools, including Sleek, have a capability of creating annotations, which is called Collaborative Annotation Framework. This is basically a tool that allows you to attach a piece of metadata to a particular dataset. This piece of metadata could contain some text, title, start time, end time, and other things. Naturally, many teams have started to use this particular approach and annotated the events that led to SLO violations in their services. But they were doing that differently. Some people, for example, opted in for creating some sort of structure or some sort of typization where they were putting the root cause or the type of the annotation into the title. Others were just building their own custom scripts in order to process this annotation data and draw some conclusions from it. This was very team-specific and couldn't be applied globally. Instagram was one of the teams who felt the need to actually do a proper SLI and SLO tracking workflows with annotations. And I will pass back word to Keshav, who is going to tell you more how Instagram team was using annotations and how they introduced a new concept of schematized annotations. And I'll be back to you shortly to talk a bit more how we expanded this concept for a bigger audience for the whole Sleek users.
As Kostya mentioned, Instagram strives to improve our overall reliability. Like many teams, Instagram has a weekly handoff meeting that we use to sync up on noteworthy events and communicate context to the incoming on-calls. During this meeting, we generally cover any major events that affected reliability, and also capture general sentiment. In my own time as an on-call, I found that over the course of a busy week, I sometimes forget all the specific issues that popped up during the week before our next weekly meeting. It turns out I'm not alone, and to combat this, we began requiring that on-calls annotate any event that caused an SLO violation with a brief description shortly after the event itself, and helped encode this into our tooling and workflows. As a part of our weekly handoff checklist, we'd ensure that all violations were appropriately tagged. Over time, people started using these annotations to try and identify common themes amongst past violations. In doing so, we struggled with the lack of explicit structure and found ourselves resorting to string processing to try and extract common words or phrases. Over time, this led to us adding a few additional fields to the annotation step itself to empower richer data analysis. Using these richer annotations, we were able to generate much more useful digests of historical SLO violations to better understand why they were happening and focus on key areas. For example, in the past, Instagram was experiencing occasional issues talking to downstream databases. These events were usually very short-lived, on the order of a few seconds to a few minutes at most, and often disappeared by the time an on-call received an alert and started investigating. Investigation rarely led to a meaningful root cause analysis, and quickly led to on-call fatigue. The team found themselves spending less time trying to identify the real root cause, and instead simply annotated these issues as an issue with downstream services. However, using these annotations later on, we identified that these short blips, in fact, were the single biggest contributor to Instagram's overall reliability issues. The team later prioritized a project to better understand these, and in doing so, identified a few cases where the underlying infra was experiencing locality-specific issues that only affected certain data centers, and also identified and fixed certain cases where product teams had suboptimal queries that were contributing to these problems. The Instagram team has been using annotations for years, and over the time, we've identified a few key elements that were critical to the success of this workflow. First, the on-call already has a lot on their plate and doesn't need more process. Make it easy for them to create annotations, since the quality of these annotations directly translates to the amount of insight you can draw from them later on. Next, you must balance the level of depth in these annotations with the amount of effort for an on-call. Ask for too much information, and the on-calls are quickly burned out, so make sure to limit yourself to the essentials. Lastly, team culture has to reinforce the value of these annotations. If you ask people to create them, but never prioritize projects based on them, people stop seeing the value in them and are less likely to expend effort creating them. Last year, Instagram adopted Slick. As we did this, we wanted to help apply the learnings we've made in collecting annotations with the rest of Meta. As most of the tooling within the Instagram team is heavily CLI driven, we extended Slick's CLI tool with an interactive annotation tool. Using this interface, on-calls can input some basic information about the event that led to an SLO violation, like a title and description. But the tool also allows collecting additional information, like a root cause, and intelligently requiring other specific contextual information. For example, if a particular code change led to a problem, you'll be asked to provide a link to the specific code change. To power this approach, Instagram and Slick worked together to settle upon a flexible data structure that allowed other teams to customize this particular workflow to meet their specific needs. It also provided common elements to help unify the SLO annotation experience. In order to achieve this, the team introduced a new concept in Slick's configuration, an annotation config. It allows teams to specify a list of matchers, or key value pairs, that must be filled in when an annotation is created. Each matcher can define additional matchers that must be filled in depending on the value of the parent matcher. This allows defining complex hierarchical relations that strictly collect the information that is necessary to draw meaningful insights later on. This workflow proved to be quite successful for us, and the Slick team quickly realized these structured annotations could empower a whole suite of additional functionality. I'll now pass it over to Kostya to tell you a little bit more about it.
Thanks, Keshav. Once Instagram team implemented the support of schematized annotations in Slick, config, and in Slick CLI, Slick team thought that this concept could be taken further by using the data from that user annotations. We could build an analytics UI that could allow teams to better understand their SLO violations and highlight the main issues. In order to start doing that, however, we needed to expand this idea of schematized annotations to all other ways how people are creating that. In the next couple of minutes, I'll cover a couple of those tools, and then I'll get back to the Insights UI that we have built. Many users prefer to use UI for annotation creation process, and it gives them clearly the visual representation of what they're dealing with. The default user interface for creating annotations in Slick and in other data tools didn't allow you to specify this additional metadata, so we had to extend this annotation dialog. We also had to implement the schema support, as well as we made sure that we are dynamically displaying different fields depending on the user selection according to the schema. Many of Slick users use a workplace bot to receive notifications about events that led to SLO violations in the form of the post in their user group. We extended the text of this post to contain more information about the event that led to a SLO violation, as well as information about the schema that people will need to enter when creating an annotation by commenting on that post. So now it's possible to add root cause and any other additional matcher to the annotation, and this annotation will be created. For many people, this is a preferred way of interacting with alerts that led to SLO violations. Besides manual annotations, we also have a very exciting capability of automatically figuring out the root cause of events that led to a SLO violation and creating an annotation for it. This tool is called Dr. Pattinson, and basically it allows you to run an analysis script, which in response to any event. And in case if this analysis script is capable of figuring out conclusively what was the issue, it will create an annotation and add this data to the annotation. Well, of course, not all issues could be annotated automatically, but there is a class of problems where Dr. Pattinson is working really well. And it's a great help for on-call people because it reduces a lot of workload for them that they don't need to do that process manually. Now that we have these different workflows of filling in schematized annotations and we are gathering a lot of data, we could build a new Insights UI to display that aggregated information. So here is a new section in Sleek UI. Well, by looking at this chart, for example, you could see if there was a specific root cause that was causing most of the issues. Or in this chart, you could see if there was a particular specific issue in scope of all root causes which was causing the most problems. In that case, that was, for example, a code change. There is also a way to see the list of all annotations that happened in specified time period. This enables people to easily see the details of the individual annotations and edit or delete them. Currently, these features are being tried out by several teams, and from user research, we already see that this greatly improved SLO workflows for them. We plan to capitalize on these and expand this feature to the whole Sleek user base. We would like to also switch from just stating the problems into a more recommendation style approach. So we can say, the particular issue was the cause for 30% of the alerts that led to a SLO violation. If you fix it, you will improve the reliability of your service by that amount of percent. We would like to work also on some new features, like ability to exclude some particular annotated time periods from SLO calculation. Let's say you have, for example, a planned downtime. Obviously, you don't want to calculate that. Or, for example, we want to add ability to analyze annotation root causes across all SLIs, because there could be cases where something particular impacts all SLIs of your service or a couple of them. And currently we support only analysis for individual SLI level. All this annotation work is going to become a basis of a formal SLO review process that we are going to introduce in the nearest future. We hope to shift team focus from just reacting to SLO violations on an ad hoc basis to a more planned approach. We expect that annotating events that led to SLO violations and regular periodic SLO reviews will become a standard practice for most teams in Meta in future. Thanks a lot for listening and watching. We hope you enjoyed it.